Welcome to Sales Talk for CEOs. I'm glad you're here. I'll be interviewing CEOs who have successfully scaled their B2B sales organization. In each episode, I'll start by uncovering the sales background of each CEO, dig into the strategies they use to build their sales organization, and wrap it up with what the future holds. We'll cover the good, the bad, and the ugly of scaling a sales organization. I'm your host, Alice Hyman. Welcome to Sales Talk for CEOs. I'm Alice Hyman, and I'm excited to be here today with Melanie Fellay of Spekit. I have been a big fan, Melanie, for so long, as you know, and watching your company grow and all the amazing things that you've done, I simply had to have you on the show. So thank you for being here.
Aw, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And yeah, it's crazy to think that we met for the first time almost 3 years ago at the Sales 3.0 conference that's when I actually attended because I was trying to learn everything I could about sales at the time. And here we are today. So
and
really,
Spekit was very brand new back then.
We had like maybe a whole few paying customers at the time.
So exciting. The growth has been phenomenal. You just brought on some funding. You've got so many great things going on. So let's start with your backstory. I love the way you started this company. You're a true entrepreneur. You just couldn't help yourself. You had to fix the problem that you found. So let's hear about that first.
Yeah, absolutely. So the backstory for Spekit is that I was working in operations, so business operations at a fast-growing technology company in San Francisco. It was kind of your typical raise Series A to Series C in 2 years and grew like crazy. I joined at employee 15. The company ended up raising $60 million, lots of potential, but in a complex business. So it was a real estate crowdfunding marketplace. So lots of complexity to it, but in the process, of all this growth, we were implementing processes left and right, launching new products, launching new services, and implementing new tools, including Salesforce. Yes. And our Salesforce was really an IT-led initiative, and ultimately was not successful.
Funny enough, Melanie, that isn't the first time I've ever heard that.
Well, and the reality is, there's a lot. We could have a whole podcast episode just based on like all the lessons I learned through that experience. But long story short, I was leading most of our operations team, servicing, closing operations around our loans, and our CEO came up to me. He's like, "Hey, we're getting rid of Salesforce. It's just not working for us. Like, what are your thoughts?" I was like, I don't really have any thoughts. I don't know the first thing about Salesforce. My teams aren't using it. But we were on First in Market in San Francisco. So we were staring literally at the Salesforce Tower under construction back in 2015. I was like, all I know is that they're doing something right and we're not. And so that's what he's like, do you think you can fix it? I'm like, well, let me kind of get my hands dirty. And that turned into basically the next 2 years of me taking ownership of Salesforce, re-implementing it, re-architecting it, integrating it with all of our other employee-facing technologies. So think sales engagement tools, et cetera, and really owning our employee-facing technology stack. Well, with that came all enablement and onboarding and training challenges around that. We were, again, our Salesforce was not your cookie cutter out of the box, contact book. It was a pretty complex org that had a lot of compliance because we were a financial institution. So we had FINRA and the SEC and like all these compliance procedures where if we had the wrong data entered, there were pretty significant consequences. And all of that knowledge, all that training laid in like our 80-page servicing manual that was in SharePoint. And we were communicating changes that we were making every other week to Salesforce over email, over Slack. And so we had bad data quality. We couldn't forecast our business, and onboarding new hires, not just onto Salesforce, but up to all these different tools that were uniquely customized to our business was a huge challenge. And so I was like, there's got to be a better way of doing this. The world is accessible at my fingertips right now on my phone, right? I can call an Uber, I can order something on Amazon.
Yeah.
There's got to be a better way than using a PowerPoint to train our employees, which was invented in 1987. And so that's when I started looking at, 3 different categories of technology. I looked at digital adoption platforms, which are really in-app training tools. I looked at knowledge management solutions, think Confluence, and I looked at learning management systems. And frankly, I was pretty surprised to see either of these technologies were really hard to implement, would require development, et cetera, or I just felt like the LMS model was just a really outdated approach, right?
Yeah.
I'm like, no AE in the history of ever is going to stop what they're doing mid Salesforce to go log into that LMS, find that module, find
search for what they need. Yeah, it's way too long.
And just scientifically, it's just not the way that adults learn. And so I was like, well, what am I really looking for? And so I started kind of ideating. I'm like, I love the ability of kind of combining these different solutions into a single all-in-one platform that lives inside of the tools that employees use, that both teaches them how to use the tools, but then also surfaces the key enablement that they need. So for example, your background, putting your sales methodology documentation actually in Salesforce where the sales methodology is reinforced, so that when they're entering the fields and it's like a question on metrics, for example, you can actually have a list of here are the questions. If you didn't uncover metrics on that first call, here are a list of questions that you can ask to uncover that on your next call, right? So really starting to combine enablement, real-time knowledge in the tools and workflows where that exists every day. And once I caught the bug, I just could not shake it. Started doing a lot of market research, attending conferences, asking people so how do you deal with this problem of making sure people know what they need to know when and where they need to know it? And I was met with eye rolls and just frustration and just we use a hodgepodge of Slack and email and all these different solutions. So I was like, okay, it feels like this is a pretty universal problem, right? Knowledge training, onboarding, this is something that virtually every company under the sun has to deal with. I was focused on solving it for knowledge workers, specifically go-to-market teams. And B, it feels like it's a growing problem because there's only more and more tools that we're expecting employees to use. These tools are only getting easier to customize to your business, which means just more change that we're throwing at employees. And just the pace of business is accelerating, right? Yeah. The amount of information that we expect an employee to know today, if you think of your typical sales rep, all of your competitors, right? We're no longer Salesforce 20 years ago where there was one other CRM technology on the marketplace. No, now if you work at Salesforce, there's 1,000 potential CRMs you're going to run up against, all of which are different, right? The amount of information that employees need to know just to do the basics of their job is greater than ever.
Exponential,
Exponential, and it's exponentially growing and only getting faster. So, I really felt like there was a need to just make that whole process of not only learning how to use your tools and your systems and your processes, but keeping up with the changes in those things. And then also knowing all that knowledge and enablement that you need and putting that right at their fingertips. And so that was really the backstory for Spekit. Ended up co-founding the company with my co-founder, Zari. She was actually a product manager at my last company.
Yeah, no, I love that story about how you pulled her into the elevator.
Literally, I literally.
And then she's like, buy that thing you just described to me. Can you buy that? And you're like, no, but we're going to build it, right?
Yeah, I love it. It's actually my favorite story to tell. We onboarded 6 people on Monday. So we're starting to grow the team significantly, but Zara and I have committed that every 2 weeks, her and I are going to do a new employee introduction to the company where we tell the story, they hear firsthand. We want us, even if I don't interact with our SDRs every single day. And we love telling that such a funny one, her reaction. I'm like, no, she, because basically I pitched her on the whole thing and she'd been living and breathing the problem for 2 years as well. And she's like, yeah, sure. If the last thing you want me to do before I leave is buy this, I'll do it. I'm like, no. This doesn't exist. Let's be clear. Let's build it. And she's like, well, I'm burnt out. I kind of want to go become, literally she was thinking of becoming an archaeologist of all things. So she's like, let me go to Fiji. I'll decide. And 2 days in, she messaged me. She's like, I can't stop thinking about it. I'm like, I know.
You got the bug. Oh my gosh.
Problem solving. I think what excites me is that, started off more as a technology problem. It was a little bit, our vision was more narrow in scope, which was how do we help people learn how to use our technologies better, has really grown into how do we reimagine the way that employees learn at work?
Yes.
And how do we make that a easier, more personalized, more data-driven experience for them? So.
And definitely, I think COVID sped that up, right? Because everybody had to go virtual, and now the person can't sit next to you and watch you and ask you questions. I mean, yes, you can get on a Zoom and share your screen, right? But it's just not as easy. And even when you were in the same office, you still need this real time. I'm doing this right now. I need it now, and I need it right there. So I just love that. Just love it. So, all right. So my question for you now is, tell me about your background in sales. You're the CEO of this company. You started up. You're definitely an entrepreneur. Tell us about your background in sales.
Yeah. So it was virtually non-existent. No, not entirely. So I started off at the company leading our investor services department. So I actually got my Series 7 and 63 licenses so that I could technically sell our financial investments. That said, I never actually got to that point because I was asked to, as soon as I passed those exams, actually take over our operations team. So, I had experience interacting with our customers. I didn't sell, and frankly, selling financial instruments versus B2B SaaS is quite different.
Very different.
But I did support our sales teams. By building out Salesforce, leading sales ops, enablement and stuff, like I felt like I understood. What I learned afterwards is that I really didn't. Frankly, I tell people all the time, I was leading biz ops and strategy, and I thought the biggest problems in the company. And so I kind of, had a bit of like that ops ego. And so I looked down a little bit on salespeople, which I regret deeply because I was like, here they are coming in at 9, leaving at 4, making double what I'm making and kind of like doing the same thing every day. Here I am like working my butt off, like solving the world's biggest problems. But what I really lacked an understanding of, which now I have a very, very deep understanding of, is just like how challenging it is to be a salesperson, both, just in terms of the emotional resilience that you need to have, that you need to have in the sales process, but also just like the business acumen and ability to really, follow the process, leverage the technologies properly, and then ultimately guide your buyer through that journey. So that was something that I learned from ground up. And actually, the reason that I went to the Sales 3.0 conference is that, when I started off, because I didn't have a background, I started listening to like podcasts a little bit. Yeah. I didn't listen to the right ones though, in retrospect, but I would like read, articles online and stuff. And I was always like, I'm pretty good at, people. Like, I feel like I'll figure out how to do the sales thing. So we launched at Dreamforce and had a ton of demos. And in retrospect, what I realize now is I was so excited about my product that I wasn't really doing a whole lot of selling. I was doing a whole lot of, hey, here's 40 features and, all excited and talking to the wrong persona. I mean, there are so many things we did wrong early on. But it was actually at the Sales 3.0 conference that I went to, one, because I figured like, hey, I could probably learn a thing or two in sales. And two, our buyer persona is sales enablement, rev ops, et cetera. I'll get to understand that persona a little bit more that I can eventually sell to more effectively. But what came out of it, funny enough, is yes, I had a great content, developed a great relationship with Gerhardt, who was a great mentor to me. But I actually met my coach there. And now I've been coaching with them for the last 3 years. And it was really a coaching program, kind of like a mastermind for sales professionals, where you not only learn some of the, skills you need in sales and things, reps from outreach, et cetera. You also learn to lead yourself and to really overcome the limitations that you're setting.
Right. The mindset and those self-limiting beliefs about sales that you admittedly had. Oh, they don't work very hard. They make so much money. What are they doing? Why, this whole mindset. And then that becomes a self-limiting belief. Well, if I've got these salespeople who do this and they're not really doing what they're supposed to, right? So that's terrific that I didn't realize that you found the coaching there. That's so great.
And honestly, it's been so transformational, not just in my in my ability to sell, but which you realize later is actually one of the most critical things that you need to know as a CEO, not just for customers, but one, because I'm always going to be selling. I just don't do the day-to-day activity as much, but this morning we had a, executive demo for a, multi-$100,000 deal. They're still going to pull me in for the executive briefing to share the vision of the company and stuff. So am I doing all the back and forth? No, but I still need to understand, what is my role? What is my purpose in that moment? And how do I best convey, what we're trying to accomplish in the marketplace at that point in time? But also during fundraising is selling, right? I think because I spent so much time, and that's the one strength I think I do have is once I kind of start liking something, even though I resisted selling for so long, I resisted the idea of selling. Once I caught the bug, I couldn't shake it. And so then it's something that I really enjoyed mastering the craft of learning. Still love to learn, have a phenomenal head of sales that I learn from every day that gives me a lot of coaching as well. But the coaching was so successful that I've actually now, as of a couple of weeks ago, enrolled our executive leadership team for coaching. And then they have a specific, AE track. And so all of our AEs get it as a benefit as well to go through this third-party coaching program that is a combination of like group coaching plus individual coaching. And, last year I did a beta test with 2 of our reps, and they've told me that is the best gift they've ever from like literally missing quota to exceeding quota. So big proponent on just like investing in your people, but, investing in the craft of sales. As many people, it sold itself in the early days was the marketing, and it was the terrific professionals around it.
Wow. So you really gave us a lot of information there. I want to kind of go back a little bit and pick a few of those pieces, because I think that, you're obviously not alone. There are many CEOs who did not have a sales background of any kind. They had a self-limiting mindset around sales, similar to what you had, maybe some other different things as well. But they then had this aha moment at some point, what sales really was and how it really works. So rewind and tell us what that aha moment was. You'd started the company, and then, where did this, what I thought it was, and I'm going to have to look at this differently. When did that come to you?
It was actually after Dreamforce. We went to Dreamforce, and as a founder, it was kind of a dream come true, because we took a big bet on Dreamforce early on. We weren't going to go to the VC route, so we had, I wouldn't say bootstrap, that's unfair. We had, we raised a total of $350,000 in angel investments between our former CEOs and some friends and family. But we only had $150K in the bank because Zari and I hadn't paid myself salary. And I was like, you know what, if our go-to-market is going to be strategically aligned with Salesforce in the early days, because I wanted us to be as focused as possible from a value proposition. So I think that piece I got right. We need to have a presence at Dreamforce, right? And so we took a huge bet. It was like a $50,000 bet for us all in, which was a third of the money we had in the bank. Went to Dreamforce, and it was a dream come true. We had so many people at the booth, and they were so excited, and we had all these Salesforce admins, right, coming to the booth, loving it, blah, blah. And I had all these meetings set up. I think I ended up having 40 or 50 meetings set up afterwards. And, showed up and, sold. But I realized, now in retrospect, I wasn't doing any sort of discovery. And the discovery I was doing was really just So
you were doing all the sales yourself at that point?
And marketing, everything. Absolutely.
Okay.
In late fall 2018, so November 2018. And I was just, hey, other tools are you guys using, not, help me understand what you're trying to accomplish, et cetera, et cetera. And so I did all the demos, and nothing was coming from it, right? We weren't moving on the deals. People were going unresponsive. They weren't able to get measures on board. And, in getting pretty deflated, as a founder, it's just, first off, a product market, which happen for probably another a year afterwards. You're just constantly asking yourself, I'm not crazy, right? There's something here, right? There's something here. We're getting the interest, but why won't people actually buy? And that's when I realized that I didn't know as much as I needed to know about how to sell. And that's what sparked my trip to the Sales 3.0 conference, which was super beneficial. And really forced me to take a step back and be okay, I need to really study this craft. And I actually made to hire someone. I was oh, well, if I can't figure it out, I'm going to hire agent or rep. Again, we had no money in the bank account, so I couldn't pay much. And, I had no idea what I was looking for. Someone that had a little bit of transactional SMB experience, which was just not our product, and phenomenal individual, but yeah, because I didn't know how to sell my product. How could I
That's it. So let's pause there for a second, because I want to move into how you built the sales team that you have now today. And then of course we'll move into what the future is going to look like, but doing it yourself. And, for some of the CEOs out there that maybe their companies are 10 or even 20 years old, they may have done that selling way, way back in the beginning, and been in the same position that you were in, or maybe not, because a lot of CEOs really just want someone else to do the sales, and they really want someone else to take care of that and not have to be involved in it, right? But you had this aha moment because you actually did it and you thought you were doing it right. I'm telling you everything about my product and service. Isn't this wonderful? You have what I call the entrepreneurial enthusiasm, and you just, wanted to share that with everybody. But like you said, all those demos did not turn into sales, and it caused you to think, so what is the problem here? What is not connecting, or what's not happening that needs to happen? And you were smart enough to go get some help, which is amazing. So to jump from there to when you decided, okay, we need a sales team now. I can't do all the selling and run the company. I mean, CEOs wear many hats. There's so much to do. And of course, you started fundraising. So where was that tipping point where you said, okay, we're going to build a sales team now, and here's how we're going to start? And tell us what you did and some of the challenges you ran into. I think you already just mentioned, you found a person, super great person, love them, but not the right fit. So that's one of the things that happens very frequently. The first sales hire is not the right sales hire. So tell us some more.
So one, I'll say I didn't actually go back to building a sales team for another year. And I actually think that is why our products and our company is successful today. And what I mean by that is, unlike many of the funding rounds that you're seeing nowadays, where it's pre-revenue, $10 million seed rounds, right? We had little to no money in the bank. And so I didn't really have the option to hire other salespeople at the time. And I think if I were to go back and do it all over again, I would intentionally choose not to hire someone to do it on my behalf, because what that allowed me to do is, I deeply believe that if you want to solve the problem better than anyone else, you need to understand the problem better than anyone else. And the reality is, when it comes to, the good news is we were attached to solving the problem. We weren't attached to the solution. And turns out, what we initially went to market with was not really solving the underlying problem. And so by not making the progress, by not actually closing the deal, one, it helped us really refine what was the product we needed to build. And in the hands of someone else, I don't know if we'd be there where we are today. And it also helped us refine who is our buyer, right? Because one of the mistakes I made was assume that, my role, because at my last company, I was somewhat of a Salesforce admin since I was managing our Salesforce. It's all Salesforce admins would love to build this. Well, it turns out, even though I owned the budget because I was also our head of business operations, most Salesforce admins don't, right? And most Salesforce admins don't really hold a lot of buying power in the organization, have a lot of layers above them.
And they don't have a lot of influence either. They can say, hey, I'm drowning here, I need help. But not a lot they're hoping somebody's going to throw them a lifeline.
Not a lot of influence. And then on top of that, we also realized even for the ones that were buying it, they weren't using it. Because at the end of the day, the Salesforce admin wants to build Salesforce. They're not trying to write documentation and enablement. And so what this helped us, it was a long and painful path to product market fit, but it helped me really narrow down, okay, wait, the people that are in enablement are the ones that are spending all day long writing training, doing training. If we can make them more effective at their jobs, if we can save their time, then they actually have the incentive to want to use us, right? And see more results from what they were doing. Yeah. So, it helped us narrow down our ICP and who our buyer was, helped us narrow down what was the feature set that would ultimately, solve their problems better than anyone else. And only once I felt like I had that internal conviction did I decide okay, now let me go build a team, because I felt like I was at a place where okay, if I can sell this and sell this successfully, and at that point in time, I'd sold it to 35, 40 customers. I was okay, and variety of customers. Our first customer, our second customer was JLL, right? And they've grown exponentially in numbers that you can't imagine since 2018 when we brought them on board. So I think it was a lot of trial and error. And then at the end of 2019, when we had just raised our seed fund, and I'm all right, I think I understand enough about our buyer. I think I understand enough about, what makes them want to buy our product. Now I feel like I can go train people. I don't know if hiring AEs before hiring the VP was the right move. It's worked out for us, is what I'll say. The reality is, I think the VP or head of sales that I would have hired back then is a very different quality than the one that I was able to attract once we got to the stage that we did. Our SVP of sales came over from one of our largest competitors, leading their global enterprise sales. Before that, helped bring Zendesk public, VP of sales at TalkDesk. He is absolutely phenomenal. I've learned more from him, and we have such a great relationship. Big believer in the space. But I think, when we were a tiny little company with barely any product and I was like, hey, I don't know how to do this myself. Can you come on board and do it for me? Yeah. I don't think that would have been the right pitch. Instead, I was like, hey, we're seeing some really great momentum here. We're really getting some traction. Oh, and by the way, here's the opportunity ahead of us. And like, I need someone to help us cross that bridge and be that go-to-market partner with me. Do you want to get on this ship? That was a very different pitch that I was able to sell. So, I'd just be intentional about, hiring your first head of sales because they're going to shape your culture, your sales culture. And at the end of the day, your sales team shapes the culture of your company. And that was something that the first conversation went from a 30-minute, let's get to know each other, to a 2.5-hour conversation on like what kind of culture we'd want to build and the sales professionals that we would want to attract. Diversity is core to, what we care about as a business and stuff. And so aligning on all of those things and realizing that like that head of sales is not just going to be the first impression that your customers have, of your product and of your brand, but also is going to help influence the kind of sales professionals you attract to your company, which will make or break, by the way, your ability to scale a really successful sales org. I think, don't rush that hire, not just in terms of process, but make sure that you're at a point where you feel like you're really ready to attract that person that you don't think you can. Wait until you're at that point, because I think that's when you can bring someone in, they can have exponential impact. Like he joined less than a year ago and he's grown our revenue by 6x, right? Like that's the kind of sales leader you want to bring on board.
Right. Well, so that brings up a couple of things. One is if I don't hire a sales leader, that means these salespeople that I hire are going to report directly to me, the CEO, and I already have a lot to do, right? But let's get back to that in a second. The other thing I see that really worked for you is that you had a very clear vision before you started hiring salespeople or a sales leader, right? Because you did it yourself. And so you said clearly, we need to understand the solution better than anybody else. And it's true. We lose so many deals to no decision because we don't understand enough. And our buyers don't either. And if we don't understand it better than they do so that we can help them with the solution, we're going to continue losing deals to no decision. So as sellers and as leaders, we have to understand the solutions. We have to understand what the buyer needs and wants and how to bring that to them. And we have to have that mindset going into it, right? Because otherwise, if we send sellers out just to do transactions, which is what so many of them are doing, even though they think they're not doing transactions, they are doing transactions. And those don't lead to a lifetime customer necessarily. And it really doesn't lead to the sustainability. It may get the growth initially, but it won't lead to that sustainable growth that every CEO really wants. So I'm a firm believer that the CEO sets the vision for sales, sets the strategy, and then hires the right people or describes this vision and this strategy to all the players. So everybody's on the same page. They believe what you believe, and then they approach the customer in that way. So I think that's where you gave yourself an edge because you had that, right? But now, okay, so you're ready to hire salespeople. You hired some and they were reporting to you. How hard was that? And how long did that go on before you did bring this VP in?
Too long. So I hired them in December 2019 and hired our VP. He joined in August 2020. And we're probably going to do 10x the ACV value that we did the first half of last year by the end of this month. So I think it just goes to show that I think I am good at a number of things. Being a sales manager is not my strong suit. I think it was really hard for me because I was like, I finally got to the point where I was like, okay, I figured it out. I can sell it. I'm hiring individuals that had, extensive sales experience, and it just wasn't working. A couple of mistakes I made that, I would not trade these two individuals for the life of me because they are tremendous and like absolutely blowing it out of the waters now. But it was a bigger transition because one of them only had a couple years of mid-market B2B SaaS selling experience, and the other one actually had, more than a decade, but it wasn't B2B SaaS. And so learning the whole value selling motion, learning how to manage pipeline, learning how to like build business cases, all of that were things that I was having to help them with and like really provide more help than needed. And,
well, you probably never thought in a million years when you hired salespeople that you would need to teach them these things. You thought, oh, they'll know these things, right?
100%. And I think I really micromanaged because I didn't have full confidence. And so as a result, I wanted to understand what questions do you have prepared to call and show me your deck ahead of time. And I didn't instill confidence in them. Because I learned from a leadership and management standpoint, it's at the end of the day, your number one role as a leader and as a coach and as a manager is to help, your whoever reports up to you to see the most in themselves, because that mindset and that confidence is going to go miles further than, how much prep did they do before the call and their ability to, drive the ultimate outcome. So, it was also really stressful because, to your point, at that time I was still managing marketing. I did have a director of marketing, but she was on maternity leave. So I was managing marketing. I was managing success, eventually hired a director of success. But I was doing so much myself, and also, starting to think about fundraising and everything that goes with that. And so all that to say, I waited probably too long once I had the two AEs to bring on a head of sales. I did get, luckily our investors are absolutely phenomenal. And one of them is the king of sales ops, is what other people call him, not me, but Brett. He was at Salesforce for a long time. So he's managed a number of different revenue generating teams. And so he was able to help me kind of learn things like pipeline management, process, et cetera. But still, that was just not optimal. So I'd say that is one thing that I would try I wouldn't trade our VP of sales for anything, but one of the things I'd probably try and shorten is the amount of time that I was actually managing our AEs, because as a first-time sales manager, as a first-time salesperson, as a first-time CEO, it's exhausting to be constantly in learning mode. And I am forever going to be in learning mode as long as I'm in this role, because my job is constantly shifting. And I think, in order for me to excel at my role, I need to grow personally at a level that's faster than the growth rate of the company. And that's hard when you're in hyper growth mode. But learning how to be an effective sales manager is probably not the best use of my time. And frankly, not what helped drive the results we wanted to.
But I think what happens when you do that role, you understand then what you need, right? So that also enabled you to hire a better sales VP, because you had done it, you knew how hard it was, and you knew now what you didn't, I don't know how to get them to do these things that they need to do. I need someone who does know that. But again, I think when we hire salespeople, we think they know how to do a lot of things that they don't know how to do. Unfortunately, we assume, and we do need to train them. And I think some of the biggest things are just what you were saying, is this is about the solution and getting the buyers, to be successful. It's not about our product and our services. It's not all about telling them all the features and benefits. And you think that salespeople know that, but they may not, and they may not know it well enough, especially at first, to really go to the solution. So they do what they know, which is tell instead of ask, right? And that's a comfort thing, right? But that's okay at first, but we've got to train them out of that. And the other big thing that you were trying to understand when you were selling is, what is the day in the life of the buyer like? And how do I help them really, right, become better at what they do and help their company? And you started to understand who all the people were that were involved in that. And that's something we also have to train our salespeople to do. And we don't necessarily think we would have to do that. We think they would get, this is how it works. So it's important. And I think you learned that. That was really hard. I can't even imagine doing all of the things that you were doing and having salespeople reporting to you. That's just hard. But anyway, you did find this sales VP. Maybe you waited a little too long. All right. So that was challenging. But how did you find this person? You have your eye on them. I call it building bench strength. I keep my eye on some people who maybe could be really great and come work, for me. So how did you do it?
We just got connected through my network. I'm one of the things that one of my best girlfriends, who is told me early on, she's like, if you really want to drive and drive brand recognition, your brand needs to have a face to it as well. She's like, so, for every minute you spend building the brand of your company, invest in building a personal brand as well. So when I started Spekit, I had like 200 followers on LinkedIn. Never posted.
Thank goodness she told you.
Not big on those things. And, that thing that I really took to heart. So we actually connected via LinkedIn that way. It wasn't really a targeted search by any means or vice versa. It's just like, he started seeing things that I was posting around just our story, the vision, progress and stuff. And it ended up being a really great match.
Wow. That's terrific. And I think LinkedIn is so important. I also think that every CEO needs to keep in mind the power that they can have online to connect to people, to be the brand evangelist, and to draw the business to them. So many of the CEOs that I know, they don't want to be on LinkedIn, or they're on there, but they don't really post things. They're not the face the way that you are. And they're losing out. They're losing out on introductions they could make to their sales team. They may be losing out on investors or hiring great people. So I'm going to just say to everybody out there listening, every CEO that's listening, take a note from Melanie. Go follow her on LinkedIn and see the kinds of things that she's doing to promote her company and lift it up and really make people aware of what they're offering, what a great company it is, how fun it is. And it definitely is drawing people to you. And I know that it is really working. So I applaud you for that, because that's extra work on top of everything else the CEO already has to do, including fundraising, right?
I appreciate that. You'll realize that I have not posted much, actually. I comment here and there, but one of the things that I always promised myself is like, I'm never going to be like I have to post 3 times a week and try and push things. Like frankly, for a lot of different reasons, the last 6 months have just been very exhausting for us as a company, just hiring lots of people. My co-founder, unfortunately, had to step away briefly from the business for personal reasons. She's back, but just so many different things. I just wasn't in the mindset of posting and having a big social media presence. But, I will say, when I'm starting to get the bug, I love writing. It was so beneficial. Media platforms, because ultimately what it perceived as bigger than we are, right? And in your earliest days as a company, you perceived as bigger than you are, because when you're going against much larger competitors, right? One of our biggest competitors just went public 2 weeks ago. We had $3.5 million raised, and they had $350 million raised. Right? If it's an enterprise customer that's evaluating both companies, your solution might actually be the best solution or the right one. If you are this tiny little startup that only has $1 million in bank, you're not really winning that business. And so I think what helped was, because I have this presence, because we have this network, it just, especially in the early days, just helped create this image that was a little bit what we were. Now that we're actually at a pretty great stage from a company standpoint, has only helped elevate our brand further.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, big companies want to buy from small companies, but it's also risky to buy from small companies, right? And those companies, could go out of business, or maybe they don't have enough money in the bank to float them until that big company can pay them, because most big companies, as we know, they take 120 days to pay you. So it's important to mitigate that risk. And one of the ways is to have a presence and show that you are out there and powerful and growing. And so I think that was just so wise, and keep up the good work. At some point, when you have a bigger marketing team, someone will help prep the material that you can post. And then in between that, you can just, like I do, rant about whatever you're interested in that day or that week. So,
and frankly, but I've just realized that my voice is something really, and I think, in terms of blogs and things like that, that's one thing. But I think, it's really hard to translate. We've tried, but it's really hard to translate. You have to be able to read my mind, and good luck with that. I don't think anyone wants to be able to read my mind.
I hear you. I'm the same way. I really, most of the posts I make myself, but then occasionally, there's just a post about an event or something that's happening, and someone else can do those and put them on my feed, and that's just fine. So it kind of helps keep the pace of what's going on. But however you choose to do it, you, as a CEO, you have to spend some time on your presence, whether that's online, in person as a speaker. I mean, doing podcasts is another great way, right? Having people write articles. There's so many ways that a CEO can evangelize. And I think that just take advantage of all of them, because it's only going to help your company, and it's going to help your salespeople. It's going to help your customers get to know you better. So there's really no downside to it if you put your heart into it and share the things that you love, So I think you really do a great job at that. So keep that up. And I want to just now kind of move to what's the future? You guys are growing so fast. How are you going to build this sales team? Continue to build it up so that you can take advantage of the market that's out there, and so that you can keep in line with the way buyers are changing and the way they want to buy. What do you see as next for your sales team?
Absolutely. Yes, we are growing across all roles. So anyone in NES or AEs, folks listening, please let us know. We're really starting to spend a lot more time thinking about capacity planning, and we're seeing about 30% of our revenue coming from expansions. We very much have a land and expand strategy, meaning we'll sell to the sales team or the SDR team, and then all the AEs want it, or then all the CS people want it, and then it goes to like what's that model look like as it pertains to the structure between staff and sales, and how do we build like the strongest relationship possible there. Actually, the SVP of Sales and Success, which has been a really great move so far. So that's kind of one of the big changes I made for the future, just seeing that land and expand model. And then,
so your VP is over sales and customer success.
Yeah.
I think that is a great direction. And you've probably heard a lot of people moving towards this revenue ops model, which sounds like that's what you're moving towards also.
Yeah. So we hired a revenue operations lead as well to lead our operations. No, absolutely. So I believe in centralizing, marketing ops. Right now, marketing ops reports up to demand gen, but I think there's value in having your operations centralized, and then having that really close alignment and strategy between sales and success is really critical. So that's one of the big changes we made, kind of like structure-wise. And then in terms of who we're hiring for, right now we're really focused more on like mid-market. We're not going immediately after the enterprise, but we are in the enterprise space. So starting to think about, what does our true, go-to-market look like if we go after true enterprise deals? Who are the kinds of sellers that we want? The one thing we know about anyone that joins a team is, if we want to bring the joy and ease of learning back to the workplace, we need to have a culture of growth and learning internally. So everyone we hire, we really interview for growth mindset. What are the goals that you're setting for yourself personally, professionally in the year? And so just think finding who are the, these different roles. What is that, what kind of results help us drive? And ultimately, like, what is the profile they're looking for each one of these roles really, really clearly. And so that's what a lot of the time that we're spending right now with our revenue and leadership thinking about.
Yeah, I think that's great. You said something really important, which is you're seeing a lot of growth from expansion. And even in much more mature companies than yours, where, we're talking 10 or 20 years old, I see that some CEOs are not paying enough attention to expanding existing customers. And I will go through with them their list of existing customers. And I can find, in some cases, the other day I found $10 million worth of potential business in the existing customer space, the people who already know you and love you and use your stuff, right? So I think as we grow a company, we have to focus on our existing customers, not just, making sure they're satisfied, but making sure they become loyal customers and grow with us, and we grow with them so we can feed their future needs as well. So somebody's got to be paying attention to that, whether you have a system where you have account managers plus customer success plus customer support, aligned around the customer, or whatever, format you choose. It is critical because it can be a big portion of your revenue that you're missing out on if you're not focused on it. So I'm glad to hear that you are really focused on that. And I think, it's so important. But then, of course, and if you have investors, they're really concerned about you getting new logos, right? So on that side of things, you do need some salespeople out there, right, who can go and bring in that new business. But tell me about how your focus on the demand from buyers to be able to buy digitally. So, all the Gartner research is telling us that, I don't know, it's something almost close to 50% of B2B buyers would prefer a seller-free experience, even with complex, software or technology or other things. They want to do at least some, if not most, of the buying process digitally. So that means, what you're now supplying to companies for internal, right? We might need to be supplying some of that externally for our buyers that, to use and learn about us without having to talk to a sales rep. So how are you addressing that?
That's a really great question. I think we actually have a free trial, a free product that was, you could have a limited amount of users. It was like for up to 10 users. And ultimately what we found is that, for our category of software, you only really need an onboarding, training, change management, knowledge solution once you reach a certain critical mass of a size team. And once you're that size of a team, you typically have a buying process, right? It's not just an individual that can make the decision. You typically have a procurement team, you have legal, you have finance, you have all these different stakeholders. Right. And so I think, we're kind of creating a new category by blending a few of these different categories together. So one, when you're creating a new category and you're having to sell them on like the value and a complete change in behavior, it's really, really hard to do that with strictly product-led growth. I think product-led growth is really efficient if there's really an immediate inherent value in the product that can be used with, just one or two users, meaning like Zoom. Perfect.
Yes, absolutely. I 100% agree. Product-led growth has its place, but not when you have something new to market, like you said, or very complex. Yeah,
exactly. So, but going back to what you said, I still think that there's an element that we do think a lot about, and I think there's still room for us to improve, which is like, okay, how do we provide as much information on the product and our security and all those questions that people have, and make that available to them? How do we provide as many case studies as possible and different examples of people using it so that they can really understand how this fits into their business before we have to fix it? When it comes to our interactions with them, not, hey, so tell me about your business. Like, no, it's our sellers' responsibility to learn as much as they can about their business beforehand, so that the only questions we're really information that we have access to that are going to help us validate here, help educate them on the value, help sell them on the value, and keep that process as short as possible. Our sales cycles are relatively short, even for some of our, sometimes we'll sell like 1,200 licenses in under 2 or 3 months. And you're talking about a solution that, every employee is using every day. But that said, that's only because we have so much of that information already available. Right. And, we leverage platforms like G2, Capterra, and others to manage that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good. Oh my gosh. It looks like we're just out of time here, but I could talk to you about this for hours. You guys are doing phenomenal. You've got a lot on your plate. I love that you have a good direction for the future, and I'm really excited to continue watching your growth. Why don't we just leave our listeners with a couple of things that you learned along the way that could be helpful to them, or just something you think that would help another CEO who's building their sales team, whether, they've been around a long time. I mean, some of the companies I work with, they're 10 or 20 years old, and they're just now really building out a sales organization. So it's useful for everyone. So what kinds of things would you share?
From founder CEO standpoint, I would just first emphasize, just make sure that you're keeping your mental health in check, and you're doing whatever it takes, whatever you need to do to protect that at all costs. Because the times that I've burnt out, and frankly, I've burnt out twice already, not completely out, but like tough recovery were just because I was just running it. So I think before worry about everything, worry about yourself first, and that you're, as energized and the right people to your team. Just, don't rush the hire, and get super, super clear on the kind of seller that you need to be successful with your product. To do that, understand who that buyer is, right? If you're selling more to IT, someone, really understand the psychology of the people that understand the kind of seller that you need. Are you looking for someone that's that super relationship builder, super fun, bubbly, that might work with enablement, but try selling that to a CTO with that personality probably won't work as well. So I think it's really important to get super, super clear on the psychology and, characteristics or whatever you want to call it of your buyers, so that you can like map out like the kinds of sellers that I think are going to be the most successful. And this is most relevant early on. I think eventually that kind of gets like invest in technologies. Like I've had Salesforce, Chorus, Outreach, LinkedIn Sales Navigator from day one when I was prospecting. Like every single interaction I've had with any single buyer, customer, prospect, you name it, is in our org. And as a result, I've got so much data that I can go back to and understand, what's worked, what hasn't. Oh, we talked to this person before. We haven't talked to this person before. We've talked to this company. Why did they buy? Why did they not? And, having worked at a company, my last company that didn't invest in a CRM until Series B, 75 employees, like you're losing such a competitive advantage by doing that. So I'd say, even though it's expensive, pay for the tools, get them implemented. It's pretty simple. You'll never regret having that data. And, as much as you can, go to every trade show possible, because that's how you're going to build your network.
Yes.
Hence where we are today on this call. So go to every trade show possible and just talk to as many people as you can. And just put your ego aside and do that SDR work like I did. Like I reached out to everyone and anyone that would talk to me, and it was hard at the time, but it was well worth it.
And now you really do understand what it takes to be not just a salesperson, but a good salesperson.
100%.
A good salesperson. So I love that you said take care of yourself first. I think that's so important, because when we're burnt out, we're snippy, short, we're, frustrated, and it comes out and it spills out over into everyone, and everyone can see, oh, she's or he's, but it's not fair to everybody else, right? So we got to take care of ourselves. And it's hard because you were doing so many things as the CEO, right? To try and get your company off the ground, and it was too much. And so I, completely understand. And having been doing this for over 20 years myself, I've had my moments of burnout. It's not fun for anybody that works for me when I'm burnout, that's for sure. And I think CEOs just really need to start to recognize you've got to take care of yourself, right? And then hire right, you said, that, and that's super important. What kind, know your customer really well, so you know what kind of salespeople to hire, and then invest in the tools, the right tech stack, so important. Don't overtool people, but get the tools you need, and then train everybody to use them, expect them to use them, hold them accountable for using them. And then the last thing that you said, which I, of course, big fan of, get out there, go to the trade shows, go to the events, meet the people. Those are great words of advice for any CEO. Melanie, thank you. I'm so glad. It's been so long since I've seen you. I'm so glad we got this time to chat and hang out together. And I hope I will see you in person again soon at the next Sales 3.0 or whatever, maybe Dreamforce, whatever event we end up attending. So I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Alice. Really appreciate it. Have a great one.
You
Bye-bye.
too. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to Sales Talk for CEOs. You can find me at alicehyman.com. Be sure and connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know that you heard the show. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe, write a review, and share the show with another CEO.